You're listening to Audiology. Support our work on Patreon and be sure to submit your requests for topics in the comments below. The stab-in-the-back myth is a term derived from German, literally meaning dagger stab legend. It represents a false belief that circulated around Germany after 1918, claiming that Germany didn't lose World War I on the battlefield, but was instead betrayed by specific groups within its own country. This theory unjustly targeted Jews, revolutionary socialists who initiated strikes and labor disputes, and Republican politicians who were involved in the German Revolution of 1918 to 1919. The myth criticized the leaders who signed the peace agreement on November 11, 1918, labeling them as November criminals. When Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party gained control in 1933, they adopted this conspiracy theory as a central part of their narrative for the 1920s, attacking the Weimar Republic as a regime established by these so-called November criminals. The Nazis depicted the Weimar era as filled with corruption, degeneracy, and humiliation, a period when Jews, Marxists, and others they considered unfit had supposedly taken control, until they were supposedly overthrown by the Nazis in the so-called National Revolution of 1933. However, historians from Germany and around the globe agree that this theory is unfounded. They recognize that Germany encountered significant economic and morale issues domestically, which indeed impacted the war effort. But experts also emphasize critical military reasons for Germany's defeat, such as the depletion of its army reserves, the threat of invasion from the south, and the superior numbers of Allied forces, especially after the United States entered the war. These factors convincingly demonstrate that Germany was indeed on the losing side of the conflict by late 1918, contrary to the myth's assertions. During the later stages of World War I, the German military, led by the Supreme High Command, gained extensive control over the nation's economy to boost war production through the Auxiliary Services Act passed in December 1916. This effort, known as the Hindenburg Program, aimed for total economic mobilization. Yet, to put this plan into action, General Marshal Paul von Hindenburg and his Chief of Staff, Erich Ludendorff, had to compromise with labor unions and the Reichstag, Germany's parliament. In July 1917, they threatened to resign unless the Emperor removed Chancellor Theobald von Bethmann-Hollweg, who they felt had become ineffective after losing the Reichstag's support. Bethmann-Hollweg stepped down, paving the way for Georg Michaelis, who enjoyed the military's backing but lasted only 100 days as Chancellor, eventually being replaced due to the Reichstag's pressure. By this time, after enduring years of heavy casualties, British and French forces were hesitant to invade Germany, fearing unpredictable outcomes. However, the situation changed as the United States provided substantial resources and fresh troops, bolstering the Allies' position. Despite German forces managing to retreat effectively and even securing victories, such as an early conquest over Russia leading to the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, their advancements eventually stalled. The failure of the German Spring Offensive in 1918 and subsequent Allied counterattacks led to accusations of a stab in the back, particularly targeting strikes in the military industries, which were blamed for critical shortages in supplies. This narrative unfairly attributed most of the blame to Jewish people. Germany's strategic disadvantages were further worsened by the collapse of its allies, Bulgaria, the Ottoman Empire, and Austria-Hungary, all capitulating in late 1918. This left Germany vulnerable, especially from the south, prompting Allied plans for an advancement towards Munich. Acknowledging the bleak outlook, Hindenburg and Ludendorff recognized Germany's impending defeat and advocated for an armistice, opting to shift the responsibility of negotiating peace to the newly formed civilian government, aiming to divert blame away from the military. On October 5th, German Chancellor Prince Maximilian of Baden reached out to US President Woodrow Wilson, willing to discuss peace based on Wilson's 14 points, which emphasized democratic governance and territorial concessions from Germany. Ludendorff was dismissed on October 26th as the military prepared for withdrawal, leading to the signing of the armistice on November 11th by representatives of the Weimar Republic, most notably Matthias Erzberger. Given the German public's exposure to only victory reports due to censorship, the armistice request was both shocking and confusing. This confusion sowed the seeds for the stab-in-the-back myth, falsely proclaiming that the military was unbeaten on the field and that the new Republican politicians, especially the socialists, had betrayed Germany. The Treaty of Versailles in 1919, which imposed severe territorial and financial penalties on Germany, only intensified these accusations, targeting not only politicians but also socialists, communists, Jews, and even Catholics, claiming they had undermined the war effort and the nation's integrity. In October 1918, when discussing the conditions for a ceasefire, British military leader Douglas Haig, in charge of the British and Commonwealth forces on the Western Front, mentioned, "Germany is not militarily defeated. In recent weeks, their troops have been retreating in an orderly and brave manner." The top Allied commander, Ferdinand Foch, concurred, noting, "The German army could still regroup in a new defense line, and we wouldn't be able to stop them." When questioned about the timeline to push German forces back across the Rhine, Foch estimated it could take 3, maybe 4 or 5 months, who can say? Away from public declarations, Haig showed more optimism. In a letter to his wife from mid-October, he wrote, "I believe we've now beaten their army." By November 11, 1918, Haig observed in his diary that the German military was in a dire state, plagued by disobedience and lack of discipline. British military intelligence in the same period determined that Germany's reserves were nearly depleted, having only 20 divisions across the entire Western Front, with just 5 considered to be in fresh condition. Additionally, they noted that Germany was keeping its 1920 conscript class as a final reserve, planning to integrate these young recruits into the regular forces during the winter of 1918, should the conflict drag on. Aerial scouting revealed that Germany had no fortified defenses prepared beyond their main line, the Hindenburg Line. Moreover, a report from a retired German general, Montgelas, who had reached out to British intelligence about peace discussions, highlighted a grim view. The military situation is desperate, bordering on hopeless, overshadowed only by the internal crisis fueled by the rapid rise of Bolshevism. In 1930, British military strategist Basil Liddell Hart shared some insights into why Germany agreed to the harsh terms of the armistice that ended World War I. He argued that Germany's decision was influenced more by internal collapse and the threat of new military action from the Allies through Austria than by the situation on the Western Front itself. Hart highlighted the crucial moment after Austria's surrender on November 4th, when the Allies planned an advance towards Munich from 3 directions to be ready in just 5 weeks. In addition, there was a looming threat of Berlin being bombed on an unprecedented scale by Trenchard's independent air force and the significant presence of American troops in Europe, numbering over 2 million, with 32 divisions ready for action. German historian Emanuel Geiss also pointed out the significance of the Austro-Hungarian Empire's collapse and internal issues within Germany as critical in the decision to seek peace, especially after October 27th, when the Emperor of Austria-Hungary effectively quit. Germany found itself vulnerable to invasion through its unprotected borders. This external threat, coupled with the prospect of warfare on German soil, a situation far removed from the idea of fighting on foreign lands, helped eliminate any remaining doubts among Germans about the necessity to cease hostilities. Geiss further noted that the German revolutionary movement, which started in the regions most threatened by an invasion, pushed for peace from both above by the establishment seeking to maintain the current order and from below by those hoping to use peace as a means to establish a more socialist and democratic state. Captain S.W. Roskill, a naval historian and World War I Royal Navy veteran, assessed the situation at sea, noting that the Allied anti-submarine efforts in 1918 significantly defeated the German U-boats. He dismissed the idea that the German military was betrayed by a civilian stab in the back as a myth, emphasizing instead that the quest for peace by the German civilian population, exacerbated by the effects of the Allied blockade, played a critical role in the Allied victory, along with the contributions of armed forces on land, at sea, and in the air. Historian Richard Steigmann Gall points out that the idea of being backstabbed was first hinted at in a sermon by Bruno Döring in early 1918, well before World War I ended. However, Boris Barth, another scholar, suggests that Döring never actually said stab in the back, but mentioned betrayal instead. Barth believes the term first came into play during a political gathering in Munich in late 1918, where Ernst Müller-Meiningen rallied people to continue supporting the war effort, fearing future generations would see them as shameful for undermining it. However, the term didn't really catch on until Max Bauer, a key military figure, published a piece in spring 1919 criticizing the home front's support during the war, claiming this led to Germany's defeat. The legend of the stab in the back truly took form later that year. General Ludendorff, upon being asked by British General Sir Neil Malcolm about Germany's loss, enthusiastically agreed with Malcolm's suggestion that Germany had been stabbed in the back. Ludendorff then spread this narrative among military staff, and it quickly permeated through German society, being adopted by various political figures including Kaiser Wilhelm II. The phrase was also used by the Social Democratic Party leader Friedrich Ebert in an attempt to honor German soldiers, though it inadvertently supported the myth. British General Frederick Barton Morris's book also got tangled into this narrative, with German reviews incorrectly claiming it supported the idea of a civilian betrayal, which Morris himself refuted. In 1919, Ludendorff and Hindenburg, in civilian attire, to show disdain for the investigating Weimar National Assembly's Committee on War Guilt, amplified the myth further. Hindenburg's testimony, heavily influenced by Ludendorff and the misrepresented content of Morris's book, claimed German defeat was due to being stabbed in the back. Kaiser Wilhelm II and Hindenburg, in separate accounts, referenced the conditions leading to Germany's call for armistice, citing internal rebellion and supply shortages as critical factors, but framed within the broader narrative of betrayal and abandonment, which Hindenburg's statements particularly emphasized. This narrative of betrayal, despite being a myth, became a widespread belief in post-World War I Germany, shaping the country's perception of its defeat. Before the well-known stab-in-the-back myth took hold, anti-Semitic beliefs were already present in the German military. Back in October 1916, the German army decided to conduct a census to see if Jewish soldiers were avoiding combat duties and instead taking on non-fighting roles. Contrary to their expectations, the results revealed that Jewish soldiers were actually serving in combat roles and were represented in the military at higher rates than their population size would suggest. However, these findings weren't shared publicly by the military. The idea that Jews played a conspiratorial role in Germany's defeat found support in figures such as Kurt Eisner, a Berlin-born German Jew who was critical of the war and played a significant role in the Munich Revolution until his assassination in February 1919. Following the war, the Weimar Republic, led by Friedrich Ebert, faced numerous challenges, including workers' revolts, which were harshly suppressed with the assistance of figures like Gustav Noske and General Wilhelm Groener. Despite the government's tolerance of the Freikorps, a paramilitary group, it was constantly undermined by accusations like the stab in the back, with some of its key figures, including Matthias Erzberger and Walter Rathenau, being assassinated. These leaders were often labeled as criminals and Jews by a right-wing press dominated by Alfred Hugenberg. Anti-Semitism gained further momentum after the short-lived Bavarian Soviet Republic, which was a communist government in Munich and had several Jewish leaders, was overthrown by the Freikorps. This event allowed anti-Semitic voices to link Jews with communism and treason. In 1919, Alfred Roth, leading a nationalist federation and writing as Otto Arnim, published The Jew in the Army, falsely claiming that German Jews were mostly profiteers and spies during the war. He argued, based on skewed interpretations of the earlier military census, that Jewish officers promoted defeatism among their troops. This book was one of the first to put forward what became known as the stab-in-the-back myth. Alfred Rosenberg, a prominent Nazi theorist, further publicized a version of this myth in 1922 with his work, Zionism, the Enemy of the State. In it, Rosenberg charged German Zionists with betraying their country by supporting Britain and the Balfour Declaration, aiming for a German defeat. The concept of the Dolchstoß, or stab in the back, played a key role in the propaganda of various right-wing and conservative political factions that emerged in the early Weimar Republic, notably including the Nazi Party led by Adolf Hitler. For Hitler, this interpretation of the end of World War I held deep personal significance. His decision to dive into politics was influenced by a moment of revelation he experienced while recovering from temporary blindness, caused by a gas attack during the war, as he detailed in his book Mein Kampf. He consistently criticized the so-called November criminals of 1918, accusing them of betraying the German military. German historian Friedrich Meinecke explored the origins of the stab-in-the-back concept in an article for the Neue Freie Presse newspaper on June 11, 1922. The term was also highlighted during the 1924 national election when the Süddeutsche Monatshefte, a Munich-based cultural journal, blamed the Social Democratic Party and labor unions for Germany's World War I defeat in a series of articles. This period coincided with the trial of Hitler and Ludendorff for their roles in the Beer Hall Putsch of 1923. An editor from a Social Democratic Party newspaper launched a defamation lawsuit against the journal, leading to the Munich Dolchstoßprozess trial from October 19th to November 20th, 1925. This trial attracted significant public attention, with testimonies from several notable individuals, including members of a parliamentary committee tasked with investigating the war's outcome. The findings of this trial were made public well before the official committee report was published in 1928. Jumping ahead to World War II, the Allies adopted a strategy of demanding unconditional surrender from the Axis powers in 1943, aimed in part at preventing any resurgence of the stab-in-the-back myth. Historian John Wheeler Bennett, reflecting the British viewpoint, argued that it was crucial for both the Nazi regime and the German military leaders to surrender unconditionally. This was to make it clear to the German populace that their defeat was a direct result of their own actions, rather than betrayal from within, thus ensuring that the end of World War II could not be misconstrued as another stab in the back. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more content.